This is Inspiring Design, where unique innovators come together to share their knowledge, share their insight, and keep us up to date with the latest industry trends. And here's your host, Roshan Senanayake.
What's up, listeners? Welcome to a brand new episode of Inspiring Design Season 2. I'm your host, Roshan, and Season 2, we're continuing on with the student's point of view, and today is no exception to that. We're design thinking our way through education and design featuring students from different facets of subject areas, disciplines, and stages in their educational career. So to kick things off today, I'm here with a very special guest, Elvin Djonlagic, that's it. I just did not want to get that name wrong. Elvin is 22 and a current student at QUT, studying architecture, but he's also got some passions in photography and graphic design. He's got a long history of design intentions that extend back to his early teenage years, where he taught himself several applications, which I will list in a second, that extended all the way from the Adobe suite, Photoshop, Lightroom, Premiere Pro, After Effects, Illustrator, and then the Autodesk suite, Revit, AutoCAD, Inventor, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, and Lumoin. That's impressive. And let's dive into how he actually managed to taught himself all of these softwares while studying full-time. So let's get into it, and welcome to the show, Elvin.
Perfect. Thank you, Roshan. I appreciate your time and for having me here. So essentially, I moved schools from Brisbane to Melbourne, and when I was in Melbourne, I kind of started getting into gaming. If you look at the weather in Melbourne, it's really cold, so you're always indoors. So the only way to kind of stay in contact with your friends was through online gaming, and that's when I started kind of teaming up with students in my classes. And it all started with having a thing called a clan, which is a group of players, or almost a team.
Right.
And with that, I didn't really have many resources, but we wanted to kind of create logos, create these backgrounds, start YouTube, and be really creative. We had all these creative intentions, but I didn't really have the resources or the money to pay for someone to create me a logo. So I did a bit of research into how I could get into that, how I could start that, and essentially I learned what programs I needed to use in order to achieve a specific outcome. So I kept going through plenty of videos through YouTube, through forums, plenty of Googling, finding out how do I get exactly this image that I've got in my head. And of course, it all starts with sketching. So sketching out something, seeing if everyone enjoys the idea, having a few iterations, and then moving on to that. After that gaming and kind of beginning to learn programs, I progressed to creating logos for other people. For example, DJs. I had a few people who did music. I would just like do logos just for fun, and I would watch a tutorial online, and I would essentially learn how to create something cool, and I would follow the tutorial exactly, but after that I would change it up and make it into my own style. So I believe everyone's got their own designing style, and that's kind of what you really need to teach yourself, and something that you need to develop throughout the years. So as I moved back to Queensland, I found that I was really struggling with school, and we used different programs. So I decided to do graphics in school, and that was a lot more based towards architecture. There was a lot of industrial design. There was a lot of hand drawing that I actually wasn't used to. We didn't have those resources in Melbourne. We used to do like robotics. So it was kind of just changing a few numbers on a program, but I wouldn't really understand it.
So this is in high school? This
is in kind of middle school, progressing into high school. So about year 10, when I moved back to Brisbane, I started doing graphics, and that was creating logos and learning two specific things. One was user-centered design and design principles and design thinking. So before we would jump into all these programs, we had to completely understand what design is, what are we doing it for, and what makes design unique. So anyone can grab a program, anyone can grab a product, but if you don't know how to use it, or if you don't have this kind of vision for it, it might not end well. So basically we were kind of sat there and taught how to properly use alignment, how to use repetition, how to use everything else that these design principles. So after learning that properly throughout a few years, so progressing from grade 10 up to grade 12, I properly learned how to design. And the way I would kind of exercise this was through practice, through teaching myself how to do all these. And by the time I hit grade 12, because I was struggling, I had to really teach myself all these programs, both Photoshop and Revit, as well as Inventor. I had to stay back. Instead of finishing school at 3 o'clock, I stayed back till 6 o'clock every day.
Wow.
I didn't have a computer at home, so I just had to use that. If I had to render, and I didn't really know back then how to properly render in the cloud,
Yeah.
I would have to sit there and wait for the render to come out while I would sit there and just sketching for a few hours.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like after school care for myself, and the teacher would sit there just eating.
Yeah.
There would be about like 10 of us doing it, because these assignments were actually huge and we were all kind of competitive within the OP system.
Yeah.
So for me, it was becoming kind of like a role model in that system, because every year we would be shown an example of an assignment, and I would always see someone else's assignment which was an A+, and I always questioned, how can I make mine look like that? So by the end of grade 12, my assignment was carried on for the past 3 or 4 years as
an example.
So essentially I pushed myself. I'd have a bunch of people messaging me on Facebook, can I send them my assignment? And I'd be like, no dude, just do it yourself. You've been shown once. If you can't remember it, like basically just do what you think is necessary and what you think you are capable of. If you're not capable of it, teach yourself, because that's exactly the way I did it. It shouldn't really be copying and pasting, which is what I do not condone of. A lot of people just try and copy and paste. Even in uni to this day, I have a lot of people who just try and copy my work or do those sort of things, and it's just do what you think is right by your design, because it's what you have in your mind and what you want to lay out.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why your design style has now been established and people are recognizing it. So that's pretty cool. Now, why did you choose to study Archi in uni?
So essentially with that last assignment, I noticed I did really well. I did A+, A+, A+. I absolutely smashed out my architecture assignment. That was the last one for year 12. And that was extremely competitive, that assignment. So that was maybe about 90 students, and I came in the top 2 because of that assignment. I was VHA 8, so that was pretty close to getting A+ across the whole board for that last subject. And essentially in year 11 I wasn't doing too good, and I went from maybe about a B- all the way to an A+. So I'd really kind of
some people would be happy with the B-.
Yeah, they would, but for my parents it wasn't acceptable. And I originally wanted to do engineering, because I have a technical mind and a creative mind as well. So everything I create is kind of out of this world, but at the same time I make it realistic to some extent. I try and make it kind of like a feasible thing that can be built. So with that, I wanted to do engineering, and I was really good at physics and science because I understand it as common sense. However, I'm very creative and I can just sit there and let my mind kind of take away. So my physics teacher basically told me, if you want to do the maths and if you genuinely enjoy it, do engineering. If you want to do the fun stuff and actually design it, which is what I wanted to do, you should do architecture.
Perfect.
And after he said that, that's when I kind of realized I'm enjoying my graphics a lot more than I'm enjoying doing Maths C, Maths B, or physics. Even though I enjoyed physics and I enjoy incorporating all that together, I just enjoyed doing graphics completely, and I kind of felt like I need to be doing something for the rest of my life that I'm going to enjoy, or else it's just a waste of time, a waste of life, I guess. So
that sounds cool. Now, when you first started to play with the software applications back in, I think you mentioned your early teenage years in Melbourne, to now, how many software applications do you think you've self-taught yourself? Ballpark?
that's I honestly can't put a number on it. Everything I've wanted to do, I've kind of taught myself. I've really pushed myself to be able to export what I've wanted to. I've never really had money as a child. My parents never had money. I couldn't really give someone $200 to make me a logo. And even with that, I've taught myself to do all this so I can benefit myself and I can benefit my friends and my family if they've needed something. And even with that, to this day, I decided to pick up a camera because I saw all these cool photos on Instagram, and I really questioned, how do I do that? So I Googled it. I found out what camera I need to buy, what lens I need to buy.
So you're essentially problem solving.
So essentially everything's problem solving because I have a budget
Yeah.
yeah, I have a budget. I can't really afford to
Yeah.
pay people to take photos of me just so I have a cool photos on Instagram. Essentially, it was I really like this. I want to learn how to do it. And after you watch a few videos, that's when you begin to build a bit of momentum, a bit of interest. And once that interest builds, you kind of find out if you're good at it or if you're not good at it.
Yeah.
So essentially, with photography, I found out that I was quite passionate with that. I taught myself how to use the camera, how to use Adobe Lightroom, how to use Photoshop, and kind of putting images and transferring them between the two programs. And essentially, when you do that, it's kind of like translating and throwing them back and forth between the programs is something I didn't really understand. I've taught myself that recently, how to edit something, throw into Photoshop, take something out of the image, throw it back into Lightroom, adjust the lighting, adjust the colors. So learning how to kind of interlace between programs is a big crucial step, which I believe a lot of people should learn as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's really funny. It reminded me of a story back then when, because in uni they actually don't teach any software applications, whereas now they're starting to.
Yeah.
Back when I went through it, we self-taught ourselves the software applications as well. And no one told me the difference between Illustrator and InDesign and Photoshop and this and that, right? So we did everything in Photoshop, literally everything.
Yeah, exact same with me.
There you go. And you have these presentation panels that are like half a gig and they're pixel based.
Yeah,
so
and as soon as you stretch it up, it's gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're working with these huge files just because no one else has taught you anything.
Yeah.
It took me until the first day at one of the architectural firms here to understand that you're supposed to make panels in InDesign.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do vector work in Illustrator. You're supposed to do image manipulation in Photoshop.
Yeah.
Where we were all doing it in the same bag. So there you go. And I think it's really good because it allows you to, I think, remember those skill sets like no other. It just gets ingrained in you.
It's kind of when you make mistakes and then you kind of learn from it.
Exactly.
That's the exact same thing I did. I think I had to transfer one of my files onto the tablets there, the computers at uni, and it was taking like 10 minutes to transfer my poster. And the lecturer was there and he was looking at me. He's like, "Why is your file so big?" He's like, "Did you not save it properly?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "What'd you make it on?" I said, I exported it out from Photoshop.
Yep.
And he just looked at me like,
"Oh no,
you should have made it into like a PDF and put it into another program." So essentially learning from these mistakes, and that's kind of what you carry with you. I guess it saves a lot of time, a lot of money teaching yourself these things, especially these small tips and tricks.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of these things you can't learn from one specific place. It has to be from a branch. You learn from other people older than you, people younger than you. Learn from YouTube, learn from forums. If you've got an issue with something, you type it up and you learn. And essentially you just collate all this knowledge and you can become a teacher yourself, essentially.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, where you're essentially playing with these applications. And now it has been, 12 years at least? Probably?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So basically with that, it's a lot of experimentation. I would find something that I wanted to create and I would learn how to use these different tools. There's this thing on YouTube called speed arts where people would make these cool 3D logos. So they would go into Cinema 4D, they would put someone's name, let's say David, and they would put David there in 3D, and then they'd bring that into Photoshop and they would add maybe about 30 different layers, but they would speed, instead of a 1 hour process, they would speed it down to 3 minutes. So it's like a time lapse, like something really enjoyable that you can watch and kind of see how something progresses. So I enjoyed just sitting there for a few minutes, just watching how people do, and I'd kind of try and like slow motion the video down with my eyes and look at what they do, if they're masking, what kind of tools they're using, what kind of filters they're applying on Photoshop, or how to do that. And essentially you build off of other people's knowledge. With these programs, there's an endless amount of ways to learn and endless amount of ways to kind of do something. So it's interesting to actually learn off of other people and see what methods they use to achieve an outcome. Even if you're trying to achieve the same outcome, there's so many ways you can kind of get there in the end. So that was a big part of learning, was finding other people's styles and kind of bringing it together to what's easiest for me and what I understand the most. Some people won't agree with the way I design some things. So it might be faster the way I do it. It might be slower, but it's the way I've been taught. If they can teach me to do something faster, perfect. If I can teach them to do something faster as well, I
think that's some valuable advice you just shared, because most people will look for a tutorial where they break it down step by step,
Yeah.
usually with someone talking or
Yeah.
has something written. Whereas you've gone to this speed mechanism just to make
Yeah.
things quicker, and you're pausing it to adjust your own speed. So that's
Yeah.
actually really cool. So if you're listening to this, there you go, guys. That's a perfect tip. Try it out for yourself, see if it works. Now, can you list the software applications that you've self-taught?
So I can list it in order that I've learned it
Okay.
and the intention. So the first one was to create logos from Photoshop. That's just the way I taught
Okay.
it. I said how you literally typed in how to create a logo and it would come up straight away with Photoshop. So that was my initial knowledge was, hey, we create logos through Photoshop.
Yeah.
Through that was how do I create 3D? And at that point, Adobe didn't have this 3D option in Photoshop, which is actually exists there, and a lot of people actually don't know that
Yep.
Adobe has this 3D option where you can make 3D text and you can do all these
Absolutely.
cool effects.
Yep.
So they didn't have that back in the day when I started. So I had to use a student license to get a Cinema 4D. And with this program, it's basically for animators and for people to model things. If you want to make car parts, if you want to make products, you can literally model in this program. It's very similar to 3ds Max by Autodesk. So it kind of works the same as that. You can create videos in this. You can just create still images. You've got a timeline. It's basically like 10 programs kind of put into one, but it's very, very complicated. And that program itself takes a long time to learn. But if you master it, you are almost like an expert in your industry. If you can master that, I believe you've kind of got this extreme understanding of how all design programs work, because that program itself is extremely in depth, because that uses kind of like, it's almost like Adobe After Effects mixed with Photoshop mixed with all these other programs. It kind of, you play with materials, you play with all that. So I did that just to get these 3D kind of texts to make into my logo, so I could kind of be different from everyone just doing flat logos. From there, I went on to learning Revit. From then,
This is still in high school?
yeah, this is in high school. Yep, this was so the original Photoshop. I learned that in grade 6.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a long way back, and that's when I started playing. That's where I got my PlayStation as well, and when I started originally playing with friends and all that, it would all just be online. So I kind of tried to create this team. It's almost like everyone getting cars and trying to make like a racing team, or everyone having bikes and trying to have this biking team.
Yeah.
You kind of just want this logo, like something to represent yourselves, and that's where the interest really started. So
This wasn't actually triggered by a school subject or anything like that?
this was just purely with a few friends online, and I didn't actually have a class where I could learn how to do that.
Yeah.
I think that was more towards grade 8 and 9 where I'd learn that, or towards
Yeah.
grade 10. But I never had that class option in my Melbourne school. So when I came back to Queensland, that's where I had the option to do graphics, and because I already knew how to do Photoshop, I said, all right, this
Yeah.
is going to be easy.
Yeah.
But at that point, I knew how to use the tools. I didn't know how to design, which was the big learning curve.
Yeah.
So at that point, you can have all these resources, but if you don't know how to execute something, it's kind of really pointless.
Absolutely. I mean, these are all different tools to achieve a certain outcome.
Yeah.
So the thinking is the actual driver behind
Yeah.
everything. So you're onto it. So after Revit, what did you learn?
So we learned Inventor, and that was kind of creating products.
Yep.
I actually created this. So we would basically be given these problems to solve, almost like architectural problems, how you have to adjust to a client. We were given a user to adhere to. So we had a disability, that was a topic, and I had to make a product that did not exist on the market that could be used in the Paralympics for
Perfect.
people with disabilities. So what I wanted to do was create a prosthetic leg that could be used in swimming pools. So essentially I made this leg that could be used for water polo, so you could kind of stand up in it or you could swim, and it had these kind of like these flaps, like these fins. And essentially the graphics tutor or teacher liked my idea that much, and he thought, cause I really made everything work in Inventor. I made everything millimeter perfect, everything was moving, and basically I made it work so fine. He told me to actually go to Speedo and to get
Oh, wow.
go to Speedo, because they would know how to do
Yeah.
all that stuff. So basically he told me to kind of execute that. I didn't really push on with that because I didn't have money to make like a patent for the idea, because it was a good idea, but I guess I could still look into it and all
Explore
that.
the option.
Yeah, exactly. But I believe having a problem in front of you and trying to execute it is really what drove me to learning the program, because I had to teach myself how to make these complex curves. How do I make everything fit?
Yeah.
How do I make these threads in this steel? Basically, you have to teach yourself everything. That on top of that, you have to research what kind of material I have to use. How can I do this so it, it is like kind of stainless, and how is it light? How can I use this in water?
Yeah.
So even when you've got all these tools, it's kind of how you can use this research around you.
Absolutely.
To kind of refine the design.
So you're now still in year 10?
Yeah, this is still year 10. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So what happened after Inventor?
That went on to Corel Draw, which we didn't use too much. We used that for logos as well, and making kind of business cards and posters. So that was our version of Illustrator, because we didn't have the license for Illustrator, unfortunately.
That would have come in handy when you came to uni, because you can laser cut with it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So we had that. I did a bit of media for a year, so I essentially taught myself Sony Vegas, which is an editing program. So I got the student license for that as well. But the university had After Effects, and it had Premiere Pro. So After Effects is for kind of creating these special effects into video, while Premiere Pro is more so for transitions and for kind of aligning a story. So that was learning those two programs. After that, continued back into graphics. Pretty much just finished Revit on there and kind of got to a very, very comfortable level where I was teaching others how to do, how to use the program, how to render, how to actually throw materiality on, make my own materiality for the programs. And when I entered university, I was kind of above all students in the first 2 semesters. No one knew how to use Revit, so I was teaching everyone, and I kept going around saying it's really easy, because I was really willing to actually teach people, because I know the best way to teach yourself, or the best way to learn, is to actually teach. So I was more than happy to go around. I taught a few friends how to use Revit. Had a few group assignments as well. It got to a point where I went into, I think it was Visualization 3, and we had a tutor, and I had quite a complex design to do, and I had some issues that I ran into that I've never experienced before, a few errors on the actual program themselves, and I didn't really know how to get past that. So essentially the tutor, she didn't really understand the issue either, so I had to go out of my way and kind of teach myself how to get past these errors. Do I have to start a new file completely? Essentially I had to teach the teacher. So,
that would have been an interesting experience.
So did that, and I guess I've progressed now to a point where I'm using external applications alongside Autodesk. So I'm using Lumoin. I actually downloaded, I think it was like 3 other rendering programs a few weeks ago, just so I could pick out and use these different programs and kind of refine what I really liked and what I was comfortable with. And that's what I'm still working on currently, is finding a rendering program other than Lumoin, which I can kind of be comfortable with and create the vision I have, because currently I'm not very happy with the export of Lumoin. I kind of want to find something a bit more realistic. I'm not too happy with the colors and kind of the foliage they've got in that.
Fair enough. Have you looked into V-Ray?
Yeah, I'm looking into V-Ray.
I've
also, there's another one, I forgot what it was called. Can't think of this one.
Is it Enscape?
No, there's Enscape, but there's another one that recently came out. It is something Engine 4, something like that.
Unreal Engine.
Unreal Engine, yeah. So they've made a new one, and recently they actually made it free for everyone.
Oh wow, there you go.
Yeah, so I just downloaded that just so I could try it. So I'm just going to go through all these. But from what I've seen, I believe V-Ray, as well as I think there's a add-on called Corona. If you add those two together, I've seen some unreal renders from that. And I've been through a few pages on Facebook as well, so a few threads, and they're called like rendering or like architecture rendering groups that I'm part of. And basically everyone will post their renders, their work, and kind of everyone will go in the comments and judge if it's realistic or not. They will say your water's a bit too reflective, your lights are a bit too unrealistic, and they will list down what programs they've done. They will say, I've taken this from Revit, I've put it into V-Ray, and I've gone into Photoshop after, and they'll say what they've done. So essentially I kind of see what I like, and I'm trying to emulate and narrow it down to using less programs, but at the same time having knowledge into what programs I need to export what I want.
That's awesome. So I'm seeing these patterns while you're telling me your story. It's essentially looking at other people's experiences and learning from it. At the same time, you're using either a project, or whether it's at school or uni or something, or a hobby, like right in the beginning, to play with this software to align with some sort of a certain task or a problem that you're trying to solve. So it gives you that energy to do it, not just for the sake of learning a software, and you just keep going from it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so with that, it's all about experimentation. It's one thing to look at your tutorial, but it's another thing to actually sit back from what you've learned and kind of use it in different ways and make your own style, because you can't just be copying and pasting everything, or else you're kind of trying to become someone else when you should be developing your own taste as an architect or as a photographer. I know since I got my camera, it took me a year since I started editing. I've been through hundreds of tutorials of how to edit these photos, how do I get this photo looking like this. So for that whole year, I just sat there trying to make my own style. And I finally kind of developed something I'm very happy with, and every time you see my photos on my feed, they will all align together. They'll all align nicely and just flow together. However, when my photo is posted on someone else's wall, you will see the difference between my photo compared to theirs. Both with what's actually taken from the camera, so what's taken on scene, and with post-production, you'll see how the editing's different. So with that, it's all about kind of picking your own style and developing. And with that, even if you're thinking of doing freelance work, people want to hire you for your style and for what you're exporting, not kind of what you're copying. So it's all about kind of making a name for yourself through your own style.
Absolutely, definitely. And you're onto something, mate. And it's, I think, a very labor-intensive journey, but it's still a good journey because no one else can actually replace you. It's your creative mindset, it's your creative skills that's honed in on that particular style. So that's perfect. Now, I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you, just because what you've gone through is incredible. And firstly, what was the software that was the hardest to teach yourself?
Cinema 4D, 100% the hardest, because I feel like I've only learnt 5% of it. There's just so much to go through. However, the most time I've spent on would be Photoshop. I think I've gone so deep with that program, and I'm extremely comfortable with that. I can teach a lot in that. I can basically anything I have in my mind, I can produce on Photoshop. However, when it comes to Cinema 4D, it's a lot harder, and I feel like there's a lot more learning that needs to be done in order to kind of get to that level of comfort that I am with Photoshop and a few other Adobe programs. However, Cinema 4D is definitely the hardest.
And how long did a software like Revit take for you to be comfortable with?
Revit, I would say maybe probably a year. And that was learning after school. Maybe we would have graphics maybe twice a week. So, and you would only do that for about 10 weeks. So we had the terms in school. So you'd have 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks of just learning this program while sitting after class and just...
Twice a week.
Yeah, exactly. So trying to do that. And we had this thing called OP Maximizer as well, which is where you stay in the library after school, or you stay in a class, and everyone would kind of just sit there with, like, supervised, and everyone would just do their assignments at school because they couldn't do it at home for some reason. So I didn't have the computer at home, and I only just recently got myself a nice setup at home where I can produce all this. But I would eventually have to sit at uni, or I'd sit at school just learning and spending plenty of hours there teaching myself what I can. And I guess it took about a year to get to a level where I would impress the teachers at school. So in year 10 it was alright, but when it got to year 11 I took it up a notch, and then when it took it to year 12, that's when I kind of showed everyone I'm the real deal. And because I was a bit quiet in school, and after I handed in my assignment, the teacher looked at me and said, you're a dark horse. So essentially meaning like I was quiet, but when I produced it, he was actually extremely impressed with what I had. And he knew I was one of the kind of top competitors in the class, which when I was in class, I just wouldn't want to share my work because I've had a lot of experience of people completely just copying my work. Everything I would design, they would literally have like a correct spitting image of it.
Yeah.
They were just, so I've always been a very introverted when it comes to my own work, trying to kind of just put it in my own space, in my own privacy, and I don't like to go out and look at other people's work, especially if it's for the same assignment, because I feel like a lot of people just...
You run your path.
Yeah, I just run my own path. A lot of people just kind of think, oh, I'm missing this, I need this, but it's kind of like, oh, this is my vision. I've talked to the teacher or to the tutor about this.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to execute it. This is what's going to work. And I feel like a lot of people need to also do that as well, instead of kind of trying to run around, find as many ideas. And you kind of never perfect anything.
Absolutely, and you're then deterring away from what's actually true to you.
Yeah.
So you're not running your own lane. You're actually looking sideways, and usually the horses that look sideways don't win the race.
Don't win the race.
Yep. That's pretty cool. Now, how did you manage all this while studying? Now, I can understand the school segment where they had a supervised program where you had to sit back after class and actually do that.
Yeah.
Whereas in tertiary, you don't have that. You're on your own, and the workload can be varying. I know, having gone through Archi.
Yeah.
How did you manage that?
All right, so basically, this is quite a story. We would do a thing called all-nighters where we would stay at uni. Yeah. So it started off from first year. I didn't really have like a light box to do my drawings on, so I had to spend the night at uni. So I'd come in the afternoon, I would spend all night there, go have dinner at like 7 o'clock, and then I would go home, catch the first bus home at maybe 6 a.m.
Wow.
I'd go and sleep, and as soon as I woke up, I'd have about 4 or 5 hours sleep, and I'd take the bus back into the city. So it's about an hour back home, an hour there. So my whole life was kind of invested into uni. On top of this, I had to balance work and kind of save up for, I guess, my computer, which I've got now. However, I didn't really have that back in first year, second year or third year. So I had to spend my time at uni, and I think my record is Sunday afternoon all the way till Thursday night. And
Wow.
That was actually with an assignment that you gave me.
Oh, wow. Really?
But there was 2 other assignments that day as well.
Okay.
So there was 3 assignments due on the same day, which is why I had no other option but to kind of call off work for that week and spend the Sunday to the Thursday completely obliterating the assignments. You seem pretty happy with what I
Well, that's good.
produced.
That's always a good outcome. Well, that's incredible, mate. And so obviously I feel like I know the answer to this question, but did it affect your work-life balance and grades and things like that because you're so invested in having to self-teach yourself this software?
100%. Especially in that subject where I had to kind of teach the tutor how to use the program. She wasn't very familiar with it, unfortunately. So it's kind of paying for a class and not being taught properly. And I've honestly felt for the past 3-4 years that I've been paying to learn off of YouTube and off of myself, and I've kind of questioned why I actually pay for university if I have to teach myself. But unfortunately that's the case, and that is the case, but essentially it has its benefits as well. I don't kind of regret teaching myself.
Yep.
I actually have a lot of pride in having all these self-taught programs. Whenever I go into a class or a tutorial, I know how to do everything because I've essentially taught myself. The only thing I won't ever understand properly, or the thing I never taught until university, was kind of Australian standards, and I'm not taught any of that in school.
Yep.
And I can't really teach myself that properly at home until I have a professional there looking at my work saying, hey, this is to standard, this isn't.
Yep.
But essentially I would know how to do every step.
Yep.
The only problem was the execution of making it to a particular standard.
I mean, you have the mindset of problem solving now, so it's just a matter of applying that to that context. So it's just a matter of time until you get there. So that's pretty cool. Now, I'm essentially getting the vibe that you're saying that it's very important for high schools and unis to be able to teach these tools from an early age to kids. If they're looking at entering a design or any sort of design discipline in the next 5-10 years, do you think this content should be taught at a high school level? If so, what age do you think is suitable?
I think this should be taught before high school level, not necessarily programs.
Okay.
However, I think design itself needs to be taught early on. Some kids completely learn differently. Some are good at maths, some are good at English, some are good at science. Everyone kind of learns differently, has different interests. I think it's extremely vital to separate the kids at an early age, which is middle school, which is where they've learned all the basics they need.
Yep.
And at this point in middle school, they need to really understand which path they want to take on in life. And for me, I had to teach myself without the help of school where I wanted to go and what I was interested in, essentially finding that interest. They don't really have any of these kind of classes in middle school. So I would like to see, even if it was something as simple as kind of drawing or kind of design thinking, problem solving, some of these kind of classes which can actually help students decide what path they want to take. Essentially, I think by the end of middle school, maybe around grade 9 or grade 10, that's when you should be hitting programs, because programs, these applications are just a tool and you really need to understand what you are doing before you jump on them. It can be a big waste of time if you're just sitting on a program and you're creating something, but it's just kind of unappealing and unaesthetic, and it doesn't really have any design intention to it. You're just kind of designing for the heck of it. So I think that teaching people the base principles, whether it be design or whether it be something else in life, you need to learn the base principles before you go and you use these tools.
It's the mindset and the thinking methodology before looking at the tools.
So I'm saying if you have a piece of paper and you start designing on paper, and that's what you do learn in uni, which is actually really good, that we spend the first semester just hand drawing and we don't touch a computer at all, which I think was actually a very good thing, because I lacked in that department just hand drawing and using different mediums to render, for example, watercolors.
Absolutely,
So
you have to, it's a different way of communicating, and when you have to put pen on paper, you got to know what you're thinking first.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a kind of fast way to export something. You can spend days trying to make a nice building on Revit, but you don't know how it's going to turn out unless it's on paper first, and you have to kind of show the tutor or show your teacher, hey, this is the idea I've got in mind, what do you think of it? And essentially, if you spend days on Revit, you could have the orientation wrong, or just stupid mistake. So you need to learn kind of the principles of everything, both for the program and both before the program. So basically, my biggest tip would be to kind of teach people from paper, just to express what they have in their mind. I feel like for a lot of educational departments, that would be kind of good knowledge to have, whether it just be design or just anything. Just being able to express what you've got in your mind is a very hard thing to do.
Absolutely.
So teaching that through middle school, I think that's the way to go. And essentially, as we're pushing towards a university, I feel like a lot of people disagree with me with this, but I feel like the actual architecture course should be extended by a year. So I feel like there is so many different things to learn. We're kind of just scratching the surface with everything. Even whether it be about technology or programs or just designing in general, there's so much to learn, and it's kind of never-ending knowledge. I feel like the architecture course should be extended by a bit, as much as people would hate that. But essentially, I feel like a lot of people give hate towards architects in the industry for making mistakes, but at the same time, this person who's an electrician, he's been doing his apprenticeship for 4 years, he's been paid to do that, he's gone through TAFE, he goes to TAFE once a week, and he expects me to teach him and to kind of write on a plan the electric circuits and how everything should go together. So I feel like there's so much to learn in architecture. There's not enough time, and there's so many things an architect has to cover. So I feel like teaching appropriately and teaching more in depth, instead of having hour-long classes, we should be spending maybe 3 hours learning and experimenting. Spend an hour to learn and 2 hours to experiment, and at the end of it, everyone kind of just showcases what they've got and what they've actually learned. That's a big thing, having that time to share with other students. If you're there for an hour just listening to someone and you haven't had time to kind of look at
your own application,
look at what you've got in front of you, it's kind of a big waste of time. And that's the thing I do when I go to lectures. I don't write anything down. I purely sit down and I kind of try and consume as much information, because if I'm looking at my notepad, I'm kind of distracted and all this information's going in one ear and out the other. So I try and only write down what I don't understand. If I don't understand, I will kind of ask the question. So it's all about consuming as much knowledge and having time with tutors, with lecturers, to really expand on what you're missing out on, because all this knowledge that you're not taking is what you're missing.
I think you've got some principles of mindfulness practice there, but that's a topic for another day. Now, something I wanted to ask before we get towards the conclusion was, I noticed that SketchUp wasn't on this list. Have you ever played around with SketchUp?
Yeah, I have played up. I just do not. Like, I know how to use it, and we did use it in second semester for first year of architecture. However, I don't really enjoy that program.
Okay.
I already knew how to do Revit, so anything I wanted to create.
You were proficient at that.
Yeah, I was proficient in other programs. I didn't really agree with. I not necessarily agree. I didn't really enjoy the way SketchUp worked. I didn't really think it was professional enough. But I guess you can make it professional. It's all down to personal preference.
Absolutely.
It just wasn't my personal preference. I preferred to use Inventor if I was trying to create a product. You got 3ds Max, you've got Cinema 4D if you want to create something a bit more complex, and if you want to create a building, you've got Revit.
Yeah.
And for me, I could do that a lot faster than I could do SketchUp, so I kind of stuck with that. I knew how to export renderings, I knew how to dial in sun angle, I knew how to do everything. So for me, it wasn't necessary to learn that program to the extent that I guess some students know it.
Oh, that's
However,
fair.
I think it's an important part to find what you like and what you're good at, and kind of excel in that area.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you don't want to be the jack of all trades, but the master of none.
Yeah, absolutely. Wise words, mate. And do you have a favorite program?
Photoshop.
Absolutely.
100% Photoshop, because you can just let your mind flow.
Perfect.
You can create absolutely anything in there. So
I think a couple of the Adobe specialists that are listening to this will get a lot of, I think, happiness from that, hearing that from a student. So that's perfect, mate. Thanks so much. Now, before we leave, do you have any advice for students following on this same path, having to self-taught themselves these softwares? What are your tips?
So my tips are basically to start, before you even touch the program, start with researching with what you're interested in, whether that be architecture, whether that be interior design. Find what you're actually passionate about, and once you know what you're passionate about, that's when you're more than happy to spend time and invest time doing something for free. So for me, it was sitting down watching 10 hours of YouTube. Although that sounds kind of stupid, it was 10 hours of learning, and I would rather sit on YouTube for 10 hours and learn specifically what I'm interested in. I could easily type in the search bar the exact necessity that I have, and I would get that directly in front of me. While at a lecture, you're kind of just thrown all this information, and you just have to accept what you've got in front of you, whether you want to listen to it or not. So essentially find what you're interested in, both kind of in, so with that, try and find something that's very detailed and something that's kind of open. So essentially
getting specific and defining that problem you're looking to solve.
Yeah, so essentially have this specific vision and find the ways you can use these programs if necessary to kind of have this outcome or this export. So you should not be rushing into programs. You should be kind of finding what is easiest, what is something that's accessible to you, because a lot of these programs actually cost thousands of dollars. So you need to find something that your university actually has a license for. So luckily enough, I've had Adobe licenses through my school and through my university. So I could go to university and I could use this if it was necessary, and I wouldn't need to buy the whole package.
Perfect.
If I didn't need those. So but basically find what you like, find a way to do it, and from there just keep going if you're interested. If you're not interested, kind of find something else to do, I guess.
I mean that's exactly what you're describing, a design process where you find different hurdles, you move to it, you refine it, you find more problems, you refine it, and it's a continuous process.
Essentially, if you're passionate in that, you should be excelling anyways. And it, they say time flies when you're having fun, and that's so true. Especially when learning about all these programs, you just kind of keep learning and progressing and experimenting, and you get to a point where you just become really good at something, and it was all really enjoyable. And I feel like at that point, when you realize that you've become good at something, and you've done it for free, you've done it over a period of time, it's almost something you should carry along for the rest of your life. And that's why I have chosen to do both photography, architecture, and kind of design in general throughout my life. And that's what I'm studying, because I found out I was good at this, and I've been doing it for free anyways, just learning about it. So why not kind of take it to the next level and do it for the rest of my life, I guess.
Wise words, mate. And I think this is perfectly in line with a bit of a throwback from a couple of episodes ago where Leanne Kemp mentioned skills currency. This is actually making your skills currency more valuable by you spending those countless hours on YouTube, problem solving, looking for answers, just playing with the software. So that's perfect, mate. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's it for today, folks. But before we leave, I wanted to give a special shout out to AG13 for your 5-star review, mate. AG said, thought-provoking design discussions. Roshan's inspiring design explores many concepts of learning, thinking, and communicating in engaging ways. It's a great way to hear about a wide range of topics relating to both design and design education from a diverse range of guests. And if you love design thinking or have just started to explore new ways of problem solving, this is the podcast for you. Mate, thank you so much and really appreciate you sharing the love, and I'm hoping you are kicking some major goals as well. Everyone else, if you would like to leave your review and have your name read out to listeners from 14 countries, jump online to Apple Podcast and share the love. I will make sure to personally read out every review at the end of each episode. One last thing. Jump onto roshansenanayake.com/podcast for the show notes from today's episode and reach out to Elvin as well. Let's give him another shout out. Until next time.